Hey, what's up, guys? Also Football Talk here. After spending last week on putting together my first in-season edition of my power rankings, I'm back with another weekly NFL preview, as we're already entering week 6 of the NFL season. After one of the wildest football weekends I can remember, I put together a short list of everything that happened on my social media outlets if you're interested. Links for that are down below in the description. But I want to get right into this week 6 slate, however, which is the first one to actually feature bye weeks. Just real quick, all the numbers I mentioned here in terms of spreads and totals for games, in terms of betting lines, are as of Wednesday when I'm recording this, so they're still subject to change, of course. But let's talk quickly about those 4 teams that are on a bye week right now, where we have the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints, both coming off wins, those 2 NFC South teams. The 49ers coming off consecutive in-division losses and trying to kind of figure out the quarterback situation. And then the Jets, who didn't wake up against the Falcons in London until the second half and couldn't overcome that slow start. But now let's get right into these games, starting with Thursday Night Football. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 4-1, traveling to Philadelphia to take on the 2-3 Eagles. I personally thought the Bucs may have a slow start at Miami, coming off an emotional, grinded-out victory at New England on Sunday Night Football, and it looked like it for a little bit when the Dolphins had the early 10-7 lead, but then Brady went on to toss 5 touchdowns, and they just railroaded the opposition, moving on to 4-1, with the one loss coming at the hands of the Rams in Los Angeles, whose only loss has been against the still undefeated Cardinals. The Eagles, on the other hand, were on the brink of elimination basically on Sunday at Carolina, staring at that 15-6 deficit heading into the fourth quarter, which would have made it 4 straight losses since the season opening win over the Falcons, which all made us think that they'd be in this thing down the stretch momentarily. For the Bucs, they have thrown the ball at a higher percentage than any other team in the league, basically right at 70% now, which is a little surprising considering how much the game was built on condensing formations and taking deep shots off it, but they still lead the league with 28 passes of 20 plus yards. Unfortunately, they also tied for a league high 25 of those plays against them. They're really banged up in the secondary, but at least they can make the opposition one-dimensional, as they're the only team to allow less than 3 yards per rush. With the Eagles, the thing that bothers me about them, and the team I expected them to be after seeing them in the season opener, they're averaging just 14 carries per game outside of the quarterback Jalen Hurts, who is averaging a great 7.7 yards per scramble. Defensively, they bounced back last week after giving up over 40 points in consecutive weeks prior to that. Only the Bills have given up less than their 8 pass plays of 20 plus yards, but the issue for them has been surrendering 17 first downs via penalty on that side of the ball. I don't think this will be a blowout, as I just mentioned. Philadelphia is great at limiting big plays for the air, and on the other side, Tampa Bay is missing the corners to cover Devontae Smith, as well as Lavonte David, who would be huge in keeping Jalen Hurts from having success on scrambles. The Eagles obviously won't be the team to all of a sudden run the ball on the Bucs, but the pass rushers will get tired out and not get a chance to really get upfield with a lot of those horizontal passing stuff by Philly again. Anyway, Brady will have to go back to his New England self and matriculate the ball down the field in a more methodical fashion, which I think he's capable of still, of course. So I have the Bucs winning 29-20, covering that 7-point spread, and if it goes down to 6.5, I'll probably get involved myself. The total not really something that I'm looking at, because I could easily see a field goal on both sides of the ball more, and now you're really right on top or below that number of 52.5. So let's just move on to the actual Sunday slate, and we have another London game at 9:30 a.m. with the 1-4 Dolphins at the 0-5 Jaguars, who kind of have made London their second home now. And for a second straight week, we'll get this early kickoff game, even though the 2 teams in this one combined for even less wins than what we had between the recently 1-win Jets and Falcons. Miami kind of sneaked out a W in week 1 at New England thanks to a late Damien Harris fumble, and the week after Tua got hurt, which they haven't been able to do anything significant since then, especially on offense, losing 4 straight and scoring more than 17 points just once. The Jags, on the other hand, seem to have been improving since losing by multiple scores to a very limited Texans team in the season opener, holding leads in each of the next 3 matchups before the whole Urban Meyer fiasco probably put some bad mojo in the entire locker room, combined with some bad saturation of football against the Titans this past Sunday. And with the Dolphins, we thought they would have one of the best pass defenses in the entire league, but they just got shredded for 5 touchdowns by Tom Brady, and they allow opponents to convert a league-high 57% of their third downs against them, a week after Jonathan Taylor kind of ran roughshod against them. And only the Jets have scored less than the 79 points through 5 weeks, as well as being next to last in yards per play. Therefore, they actually have the worst point differential in the entire league by 16 points. The Jaguars, on the other hand, are one of only 2 winless teams left in the NFL, along with the Lions. They're tied for a league high with 11 giveaways, as well as having the most yards surrendered per dropback defensively, and just 1 takeaway in their favor so far. You would think Jacksonville should be favored in this game being played in the UK, but I'm not sure if that really applies here, because they have a rookie quarterback, a rookie head coach, and a very young team overall, which doesn't have all those guys that have been to London that many times. The Miami secondary is very vulnerable, especially looking at that nickel spot, where the Jaguars' Laviska Shenault could have a big day. But on the other side, I'm looking at a rookie receiver for the Dolphins in Jalen Waddle, hopefully finally having his breakout game, getting involved down the field, where Jacoby Brissett is willing to push the ball down there. And I don't think the Jags have the pass rush to exploit the Dolphins' biggest weakness, which is the offensive line, especially on passing downs. The whole vibe and attitude of the Jags here is just a mess right now. Urban Meyer probably having to answer some questions that he doesn't want to, and I'm not sure if those guys really want to fight for him. So all in all, with Brian Flores, a more experienced guy, leading his troops and hungry for that next W, I think the Dolphins take care of business here, winning 27-23, just covering that spread and being right around the total number here. So nothing that really stands out from a betting perspective. And with that, we move on to the 1 p.m. slate, starting things off with the Kansas City Chiefs at the Washington football team. Both teams are 2-3 right now. Chiefs favored by a touchdown, total set at 55.5. And what the hell is happening? When was the last time we've seen the Chiefs be sub 500? Which actually was the case already at 1-2 2 weeks ago. But before that, we hadn't seen it since all the way back in 2015, when Mahomes had just taken over as a starter for Texas Tech. They faced arguably the 4 best teams in the AFC, in the Browns, Ravens, Chargers and Bills, but they hosted 3 of those games and lost as many. And this is as shaky as we've seen them in the Mahomes era for sure. Washington's had an up and down season so far themselves, needing a retry for a game-winning kick, thanks to the Giants jumping offside, and the 4th quarter comeback against the Falcons to not be winless at this point. These were 2 teams I could have easily seen be among the final 4 in the end, but it's not looking good right now. For the Chiefs, they have scored 0.3 points more per drive than any other team in the league, but they're also tied with the Jaguars for an NFL high 11 giveaways. And unfortunately on defense, they give up 0.6 yards more per play than the next closest team in the Lions, as well as the most points surrendered at 163. I mean, they've given up 8 plays of 40 plus yards for the air this season, and they've only recorded 7 sacks, which are both at the bottom of the league as well. For Washington, do we all remember when we said this Washington defense would be awesome this year? Well, only the Chiefs have given up more than their 155 points this year, and only the Dolphins allow a higher percentage of third downs to be converted against them. Their offense has actually been more inspiring, but Taylor Heineke is just doing enough in the big moments, and Terry McLaurin is averaging 80 yards per game right now. So on the surface, with the 2 worst scoring defenses, and still some pretty good offense being played, this game having the highest over-under of the week makes sense. A big issue for the Chiefs has been lacking the patience to work their way down the field in smaller chunks, and then when the defense can't stop the opposition, Mahomes having to force the issue to some degree. That's exactly where Washington has had its issues, being very predictable in the 2 high shells and giving easy access to the middle of the field, which could lead to a big Travis Kelce game here. Taylor Heineke should have plenty of time against this weak Kansas City pass rush, where the status of Chris Jones will be a huge factor. Washington has better talent on defense, but with how bad they've been on that side of the ball, and Kansas City being more capable offensively, I have them taking care of business here though. So I got the Chiefs by 10 here, 34-24. Another one where I might look at the Chiefs if the number goes down to 6.5. The total is just too high to bet it. That's really a crazy number in the NFL, one of the highest totals we've had so far, even if I actually have them crossing that number. A game with a much lower total, but even bigger spread, is the LA Rams at 4-1 going to New York to take on the 1-4 Giants. Rams favored by 10.5, over under set at 47.5. First and foremost, the feeling about these 2 teams right now is just wildly different. The Rams are in contention for the top team in the NFC, and if not for the 1 loss on the year coming at the hand of the Cardinals, I'd be okay with calling them that. You can look at this Arizona game as a bit of a sandwich spot, considering they just hosted the reigning champs in the Bucs and had a Thursday night trip to Seattle planned, which they both took care of with wins by multiple possessions. For the Giants, they did win in comeback fashion in New Orleans 2 weeks ago, after failing to come up with the big plays to bring home W's up to that point, and they were actually tied 10-10 with the Cowboys this past Sunday, but then got boat raced, thanks in large part to injuries to Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, who will both be out again this game. Looking at the Rams, they've now moved into first place with 6.7 yards per play on offense, and they're 8.8 yards per dropback, a head and shoulders above the rest of the league. They can protect Matt Stafford with a league-low 4 sacks surrendered, and he delivers big plays for them down the field. Defensively, they've certainly taken a step back compared to last season, but they've been dealing with some injuries, and let's not act like they haven't faced 3 of the top 6 offenses in yards per play, not counting their own, over these last 3 weeks, after holding the Bears and Colts to 31 combined points over the previous 2. Flipping things over to the Giants, the defense has fallen off statistically again due to 44 points given up to the Cowboys this past Sunday, after they have been moving up the ranks the couple prior, but the 2 issues I have with them, the bottom 3 in pressure percentage, and they've allowed a league-high 74% of passes to be completed against them. Daniel Jones has not been the problem for this team, but rather the skill position guys on offense never being healthy at the same time, and the offensive line is not really opening up room to run, while they now miss Saquon for a couple of weeks at least. This is a dangerous spot for the Giants in my opinion. Mike Glennon just doesn't offer any big playability of Matt Stafford, and if he tries to match it, that could get the G-Men into a lot of trouble, especially since I don't see how they can really slow down Aaron Donald, wreaking havoc on the interior. The one spot where the Rams can be had in my opinion defensively can be in the slot, assuming Jalen Ramsey will be more on the outside again, where Kadarius Toney just had a breakout game, and I could see him being heavily featured once more. Big Blue has to beef up front to make the Rams one-dimensional, and they have a deep secondary, but McVay has had the answers to dictate coverages and attack them this season, so I think the Rams will control this game pretty much from start to finish. Give me the Rams winning 30-17, so covering the 10.5 point spread, the largest one of the week, if I can remember correctly. At the price, I'm not sure if I want to get involved here, but if it goes down to 9.5 maybe, I might look into it on Sunday. And with that, we move on to an AFC South battle between the 1-4 Texans and the 1-4 Colts. Colts were up by 9.5, over-under set at 42.5. I think we can all agree that the AFC South is the weakest division in the NFL. The Titans are clearly at the top of the group at 3-2, even if they've been far from convincing so far, I would say. And the Jaguars are one of the only 2 teams to not win a game this season, which the other one in the Lions has been a lot more competitive, I would say. But these have not been good teams, and their wins respectively have come against the Jacksonville team that I just mentioned, and the fellow 1-win Miami squad. The Texans have put up some good fights, drawing up trick plays and going after the ball defensively, and I was shocked to see this line be as high as it is, as Indy doesn't have a ton to hang the hat on either, with a streaky offense and a defense that's been banged up and vulnerable in the back end, which allowed the Ravens to come back from 19 points down in the second half against them on Monday night. For the Texans, we've seen the highs and lows of Davis Mills already, I feel like, with 4 interceptions against the Bills, followed by tossing 3 touchdowns and nearly beating the Patriots the week after. It's certainly not helpful that they average a league low 3.1 yards per carry, and the defense is starting to pull away from the rest of the league with 45 missed tackles, and only the Colts have recorded fewer pressures this season. Which brings us to these Colts, where for them, the run game is starting to pick things up, rushing for 262 yards combined over the last 2 games, to go along with a home run by Jonathan Taylor on a screen pass early on in Baltimore, and Michael Pittman is continuing to make big plays for his team in his second year. The defense has actually become more of a disappointment, I would say, as the pressure percentage is 14.1%, is the lowest in the league, and opposing quarterbacks average a passer rating of 125 against them, which is by far the highest out there, as they're not down to like 4th and 5th string corners. So as I mentioned, I think this line is too high. The Texans have deficiencies on the roster, but they're at least average at stopping the run, and the Colts don't really have anybody who can cover Brandon Cooks consistently. Davis Mills should have another nice day against a fairly simplistic defense that won't get after him like the Panthers did, for example, a couple of weeks ago. And if Carson Wentz isn't careful with the ball, Houston has a couple of guys on the back end who can pick off those passes. Jonathan Taylor is getting into a groove right now, however, and with the Texans' bad tackling efforts, I have a tough time seeing how they can slow him down as he's rumbling downhill, especially if he catches the ball on the run some more. So I have Indy winning here, but with some of the factors I mentioned and the unclarity about the kicking situation for the Colts, I have this as a 6-point affair, so give me Indy winning 26-20. So if I can get that number at 10, like it was early on, I might actually grab Houston here. It's a bit of a scary thought, but that's how I project the game to go. So we'll move on to the Cincinnati Bengals at 3-2, going to Detroit to take in the 0-5 Lions. And we'll get to the other team involved in that game with the Bengals last week, as the kicker Evan McPherson and the Packers veteran Mason Crosby tried to outdo each other with missed field goals that would have won the game for those teams. They still have shown a lot this season, winning close contests, blowing out the AFC North Big Brothers and the Steelers, and now being inches away from beating the Packers at home. Detroit on the opposite side has just received another heartbreak on a walk-off game-winning field goal by the Vikings, after Justin Tucker of the Ravens did the same to them and set an NFL record for the longest field goal ever in the process. So both these cats can bite, but only one has actually been able to win the battles. Starting off the Bengals, first and foremost, that connection between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is for real, as the rookie wide is averaging over 90 yards and a touchdown per game. And while nothing really stands out about that offense, they seem to always make plays when they need to. On defense, they're second to only the division rivals in the Ravens in tackles for loss made, and they surrender exactly 10 yards per completion, keeping everything in front of them in zone coverage and rallying up to tackle. While for the Lions, I really think they would be up there in the top 10 in rushing, if not for multiple injuries on the offensive line, with DeAndre Swift being one of the most dynamic young backs in the league, but the passing attack is just very limited, with only 5.6 yards per dropback. The defense has given up a few big runs, but overall they're allowing teams to convert just 23% of carries into first downs. Through the areas where they've had major issues, as only Jacksonville has given up more net yards per attempt. The obvious mismatch in this game is Burrow and an array of weapons against the porous Detroit back 7. I don't know how they can really slow that down, even though the Lions, I believe, have the front to put Cincinnati behind the sticks when they try to run the ball in early downs. Flipping things around, the Bengals were missing Larry Ogunjobi last week, who has been great for them up front, because they've been in control of the line of scrimmage for the most part this season. So I'm not sure how much of a DeAndre Swift game this will be, unless they can get the ball to him in space. While Jared Goff will be asked to test his coverage and throw the ball between the second and third level, because otherwise we'll see the receivers get stopped short of the first down marker routinely. So with the ball being in the hands of these quarterbacks, and the advantage clearly going to Burrow here, individually as well as in terms of receiving corp, I gotta give it to the Bengals here, winning 27-23, so just covering that spread and right around the total number, nothing that really stands out to me from a betting perspective, so to speak. Which brings us to two NFC North rivals of the Lions in the Green Bay Packers at 4-1, going to Chicago to take on the Bears at 3-2. Packers favored by 4.5, total set at 45 points. And as I mentioned with this last game, the Packers were the other team involved in that crazy back and forth of missed kicks along with the Bengals. I felt like they were in control for most of the middle part of that game, and their kicker actually let them down more so, which was very reminiscent of a Crosby game from a couple of years ago actually. Before that one, they had on another last-second field goal at San Francisco, and then beat the Steelers at home by double digits. Now they get to go to Chicago, where Rodgers and company haven't made this feel like a rivalry over the last few years, but the Bears finally have a quarterback of their own who can change the complexity of games with a couple of big plays. Chicago has put together a strong run game, and the defense has been owning the line of scrimmage pretty much since week 2, so this might actually be the most interesting iteration of this long-lasting rivalry that we've seen in a while. With the Packers, we just discussed how great the connection between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase was for Cincinnati, but unfortunately for those guys, the one on the other side of the ball was even better, because right now, I don't know how we can really stop Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, because of the way they move that guy around and attack the open space, to go with being right at the league average in run-pass ratio. On defense, they're still at the bottom of the league, with only 10 tackles for loss, and they're not the only team to yet record a stop in the red zone, allowing opponents to go 13 for 13 in terms of touchdowns, but they've created 8 takeaways, and they tackle pretty darn well. For the Bears, they average a league-low 4.2 yards per play on offense, and they are still the only team to average less yards per dropback than rush attempt, which is why they're actually one of only 3 teams to run it more than they throw it. But Justin Fields is starting to provide them with more big plays than we've seen from them in years, and the defense has played very well when they've been ahead and able to get after the quarterback, leading the NFL with 18 sacks. The two things that make this game feel different than any other Green Bay and Chicago matchup in recent memory, the playmaking ability of Justin Fields, Khalil Mack now being a nightmare matchup potentially for both of those offensive tackles, depending on the status of Elgton Jenkins for the Packers. The big question will be how the Bears approach Davante Adams, because they've been able to slow down Dalvin Cook pretty well, for example, in recent years, which is a similar run scheme to Green Bay's, and I don't see another matchup that I clearly favour the Packers on. Jalen Johnson has looked good in year 2 at corner, but they better not leave him, or anybody else for that matter, in one-on-one coverage against Tay. Rodgers will take advantage of defenses overcompensating for things like that, and the Packers have been patient in the offensive approach. But in key moments, Chicago has to have a plan for not allowing those two guys to beat them, and Justin Fields has to find the right balance on the other side, not getting overly greedy versus a defense that can force some turnovers, but at the same time providing some big plays. I still think the Packers win this one, but it's going to be a close one, with the Packers winning 27-23. I was surprised to actually see the over at only 45 points, and that might be something I'll actually look into. But now let's move on to the marquee matchup of this 1 p.m. window, with the Los Angeles Chargers at the Baltimore Ravens, both teams at 4-1, home team favored by 3 points, over-under set at 51.5. When I put together my graphics for this weekly preview, it really came down to 2 games that I wanted to potentially put on the cover photo. This one came up just short, but it's clearly the must-watch game of this 1 p.m. window like I just mentioned. Outside of Buffalo, these might be the 2 best AFC teams right now. It is intriguing to see very different approaches from a schematic perspective, but similarly thinking coaching staffs, led by Brandon Staley and John Harbaugh, who play the percentages with a lot of the situational decisions and the way that they try to attack. The Chargers have gone for a murderous roll now, winning at Kansas City, defeating the then 3-0 Raiders at Las Vegas, and just now coming out on top of a back-and-forth shootout against the Browns. The Ravens have been involved in some dramatic affairs themselves, losing in overtime to the Raiders, then overcoming their arch-rivals in the Chiefs, just surviving in Detroit, before manhandling their opponents in Denver, and just now overcoming a 19-point second-half deficit at home against the Colts on Monday night. It's not always been pretty, but they've gotten the job done. Herbert and the Chargers have now put together a league-high 3 game-winning drives. They've just gone slightly below the 50% mark on third downs, but they've become the most aggressive teams with going for it on fourth down, and right now are at an absurd 7 of 8 on the season, even though they certainly benefited from some calls going in their favor against the Browns this past Sunday. It has surprisingly been the weak spot, in particular not being able to stop the run, ranking dead last in multiple categories. While for Baltimore, only the Bucs and Raiders have recorded more than the 24 passes of 20 plus yards, even though those 2 teams are both top 5 in pass play percentage, and Baltimore is only 26th, and they're also tied for the most runs of at least that yardage with 7, so they can create explosive plays in multiple ways, and Lamar right now is playing at an extremely high level, shutting up a lot of those haters and racking up more yards than 18 other teams altogether. On defense, they're now number 1 in tackles for loss with 29 of those, and that young secondary around All-Pro Marlon Humphrey has been getting better every single week, as they've dramatically improved from near bottom to 7th best on third downs now. It'll be such a fun one to watch, with how capable those 2 offenses are and how aggressive they are on fourth downs. We might not see them punt all game long. What's scary for Baltimore in this matchup is that Herbert has the big arm to punish them for playing man coverage on the back end, and at least in terms of athletes that Staley can deploy on defense, they can box Lamar in to some degree. The big issue I have here with the Chargers, however, is that they've given up more yards per carry than any other team in the league at 5.6, while there's only 3 teams that average more yards per carry offensively than the Ravens. Tyson Williams should be healthier this Sunday, who has clearly been the most effective back for them, and when I look at this Ravens defense, between Marlon Humphrey and Tavon Young, they can at least slow down Mike Williams and Keenan Allen on the Chargers side. So the key matchup to watch out here for may actually be Austin Eckler against second-year linebacker Patrick Queen. Still, I like the Ravens here, who have the better kicker and should win on a walk-off field goal in my opinion, giving the Ravens 28-25, making the over worth a look in my opinion. Which brings us to the 2-3 Vikings at the 3-2 Panthers. Minnesota favored by a point, total set at 46, and in this final 1 p.m. matchup, we have 2 teams that were on the opposite ends of game-winning field goals, as the Vikings handed the Lions another heartbreaking defeat last week, while the Panthers were suffocating the Eagles through 3 quarters and were up by 2 scores before making a couple of bad mistakes on offense. Minnesota has been one of the worst good teams I would say this season, as they had opportunities to win every single one of their games, but simply haven't been able to make the plays needed to come out on top of them. Carolina, on the other hand, has now dropped 2 straight, following the 3-0 start, where their defense, which was number 1 in nearly every statistical category, was run over by the Cowboys, and now they just didn't close the door on a feisty Eagles squad. For the Vikings defensively, they had only forced 2 turnovers heading into this past Sunday, but were able to double that number, and only 3 other teams have given up a higher yards per carry average. They have surprisingly pressured the quarterback more than any other team in the NFL, not named Carolina, but unfortunately the quarterback Kirk Cousins has also been pressured at the third highest rate in the league, which is really the one issue on offense, as Cousins has played at a high level, they've mostly taken care of the ball, and they have the pieces at wide receiver to strike you. While for the Panthers, as I mentioned, they still pressure the quarterback on a league-high 32.3% of dropbacks, and even with that one bad showing against the Cowboys, only the Bills have surrendered less yards per play on the season. The status of Shaq Thompson in the middle will be huge once again, because he had been playing at a near all-pro level, while offensively, they're certainly still missing Christian McCaffrey, and Sam Darnold can turn back into the turnover machine he was in New York for the most part. One other thing that caught my eye when going through the numbers, Carolina averages 4 net yards less than any other team in the league per punt, at just 37.5 yards, so that has been a bit of an issue for them. This could be a sneaky good game for this early slate, where the Vikings can really start gaining some momentum, and the Panthers are looking to not completely lose theirs. Minnesota brings the type of balanced offensive approach to not allow the Panthers to bring all the heavy pressure looks on third and long situations, but the offensive line will be on the fire by Brian Burns, Hassan Reddick and company. The Panthers should still be without Christian McCaffrey, but rookie Chuba Hubbard has looked good in a prominent role, and they have the weapons at receiver to create issues for this old Vikings secondary. Sam Darnold has seemingly been blind a couple of times with hang defense in the seam areas, which is where the Vikings can be dangerous with those two linebackers falling off versus crossers. I could see another pick coming on one of those to make things interesting late, but I think the wrong team is favored here, even if this was played on a neutral field. Given the Panthers winning 26-23, so a Carolina money bet line or even grabbing that +1, that represents some value for me here. Which brings us to the midday slate, and these three are all actually 4:25 kickoffs, starting things off with the Arizona Cardinals at 5-0, going to the Cleveland Browns at 3-2. And I actually chose this game from a cover photo due to multiple reasons. The first one being that if the Browns pull out that W this past Sunday against the Chargers, and if not for a couple of calls going vastly in Los Angeles' favor, and some horrible late time management for Cleveland, they should have actually. And then of course the Cardinals are the only undefeated team left, so I believe this has the chance to be a Super Bowl preview. With two former Oklahoma quarterbacks in Kyler Murray versus Baker Mayfield, the Cardinals' veteran pass rushers against arguably the best offensive line in the NFL, but also what I believe are the offensive and defensive MVPs right now between Kyler and Myles Garrett. Arizona hasn't necessarily dominated the opposition since week 1 at Tennessee, since I think the Rams game could have actually been a lot closer than the final score would indicate, but they've been able to get the job done in a lot of different ways, outscoring teams, but also winning ugly ones, like against the Niners a week ago for example, while the Browns have now lost two high-scoring affairs against the AFC West teams in the Chiefs and Chargers, but to me are probably as complete a team as we have in the entire NFL. Let's start with the Cardinals here. They've scored the second most points, and there's only 5 teams that have given up less, giving them the second best plus-minus in the NFL behind only Buffalo. They're also tied for third with a turnover differential of +5. The defense has found ways to come up with big plays, flying around the fields and going after the ball. However, they are quietly surrendering 4.5 yards per carry, which is next to last only to the Chargers. For the Browns, they just became the first team in NFL history to score 40 plus points and not turn the ball over in a game, but still lose. Their 5.4 yards per run and 51 first downs on the ground are the most in the league, and we've seen them create explosive plays in the pass game as well, even if Baker doesn't quite seem right, and we're still waiting for that Odell Beckham Jr. breakout. I can just tell you he's open out there. As we flip things around, only 2 other teams have given up less yards per carry defensively and pressured the quarterback at a higher rate, so they can control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. The last statement I made here is key, because this Browns team does not feel like it has the same record as the Browns or Titans for example. I think they can compete with just about anybody in the league and could easily be 5-0 themselves heading into this weekend. Arizona absolutely has the advantage at the most important position, and Kyler Murray is who really scares me, because he's pulled this team out of some bad situations several times already this season, while Baker hasn't looked right since week 2. The guy to watch here is Browns rookie linebacker Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, whose speed laterally has been incredible to watch. I think we'll see him get deployed as a spy on Kyler on a large percentage of third downs and create some big stop for this team. While on the other side of the ball, I don't see the Cardinals being able to hold Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt under 150 yards on the ground. Plus we have that X factor in OBJ, who I hope can finally have the ball put on him on one of those home run calls off play action. So with that being said, I have the Browns beating the last undefeated teams in the Cardinals here, 27-24. Maybe if the public jumps on Arizona and this moves closer to a pick'em, I might actually bet the Browns here, but right now nothing to really get excited about from a betting perspective. Which brings us to an AFC West battle between the Broncos and the Raiders, both sitting at 3-2 now. Broncos favored by 3.5, total set at 44.5. And remember when everybody said that these were two of the best teams in the AFC and all that kind of stuff? Well, after starting 3-0, they've now both lost 2 straight and not looked very good in those contests, actually losing both of their games by double digits. The Broncos have been without 2 of the top 3 receivers and missing a Pro Bowl and Bradley Chubb off the edge. While the big news for the Raiders, of course, is the departure of John Gruden, which I don't really want to get into here, but I've never understood how you can lead men of all colors in a predominantly African-American league, and some of the comments he's made are simply unacceptable. From a football perspective, they have been exposed to some degree for being such a one-dimensional team offensively, as Josh Jacobs doesn't totally look right and can give them a presence on the ground, and the defense hasn't been able to get off the field on third downs. So this really could decide which of these two AFC West teams will be in the mix for a wildcard spot down the road, while the other all of a sudden drops to 500. And we'll talk about the Broncos here first, because I think they're certainly missing those 2 wide receivers that they usually have out there with Cortland Sutton in 11 personnel, and Teddy Bridgewater is getting pressured at the highest rate league-wide. Defensively, they've been the very best at tackling, however, pretty much all season long, with only 20 total misses through 5 games, and they're allowing a league-low 55% of passes to be completed against them. And it may not be your standard statistic, but they're beating their opponents by an average of 8.3 yards of starting field position, meaning the difference between theirs and their opponents. While for the Raiders, we've seen that offense have some issues these last 2 weeks when Derek Carr has been under pressure, as Khalil Mack got his shot at revenge this past Sunday. They're still second to only the Bucs with 25 passes of 20 plus yards, but only the Texans average less than the 3.2 yards per carry, which makes them pretty one-dimensional, like I said. The defense has been playing very well, as they're top 5 in yards per play surrendered and quarterback hits, but the issue has been not being able to stop teams in the red zone, where they've surrendered touchdowns 10 of the 11 times they've been there. Both of these teams are in desperation mode, I would say, looking to get out of the slump, while the Raiders have to deal with a major distraction right now, and we'll have to see how that affects the locker room. I can tell you, no matter what you think about the guy, Las Vegas not having Gruden's feel for offensive flow and situational play calling will hurt against a defensive guru like Vic Fangio, who will have that defense at their best behavior after last weekend. The Denver offense will have to step things up as well, keeping Daddy B protected and finding ways to work other parts of the field, as the Silver and Black will be focused on not letting Cortland Sutton beat them. The one thing that stands out to me about the Raiders defense is that they're allowing 4.6 yards per carry, and Denver wants to control the pace of the game, as they've done all season long, with the best time of possession mark league-wide. Melvin Gordon is a solid veteran still, but they need to feed Javonte Williams, the rookie, and I think they finally will. So given the Broncos winning 24-20, right around that spread and the total number, so nothing that I look into really here. And with that, we move on to the third and final midday game here, with the Dallas Cowboys at 4-1, traveling to New England to take on the 2-3 Patriots. Cowboys favored by 4, total set at 51 points. We have the artist formerly known as America's team, looking to get back to a championship game for the first time in 26 years, going up against what has been the best team in America over that stretch, but was this close to starting the year off 4-4. I have to reiterate this. Dallas was a questionable pass interference call and or a last-second field goal at Tampa Bay in the season kickoff game away from being undefeated at this point, as they handed the Chargers their only loss of the season in Los Angeles and have manhandled the last 3 opponents, with the Panthers being the only ones to make things kinda interesting late. For New England, we've seen them make some atypical mistakes, like turning the ball over in big spots and being outcoached by some teams. They did pick off Jets rookie quarterback Zach Wilson 4 times and kinda dominated that game, and they could easily have beaten the Dolphins and Bucs before they outscored the Texans 16-0 in the second half on Sunday, and likely re-energized that team to some degree. Still, this is a total clash of styles, as we have arguably the most capable offense for Dallas against a team that wants to slow things down and keep the score in the teens. Dallas is the only team in the top 5 in average yards per pass and rush attempt, while also being one of only 2 units to convert more than half of the third down attempts. The defense will allow you to move the ball between the 20s, but Trevon Diggs right now is an absolute ball magnet with 6 interceptions in 5 games, and the young guys up front are really getting after it. The Patriots, on the other hand, as far as offensive approach goes, only 3 other teams throwing the ball at a higher rate than them is probably not where they want to be. Damien Harris is nearing the doghouse if he can't hold on to the ball, but that downhill approach in the run game is where they want to be. And when the full offensive line is available, I think we'll see more of that. On the defensive side of the ball, they just got kind of lit up by Texans rookie Davis Mills for 3 touchdowns, but they're allowing just 3.8 yards per carry, and they can challenge opposing passing games with their well-rounded secondary, holding quarterbacks to a passer rating barely above 80. This should not be a walk in the park for Dallas here, because when New England is focused from the start, and I think they will be following that slow start at Houston, having come off that emotional loss to Brady and the Bucs, they still usually have a plan that creates issues for the opposition, and then they're very adaptable in-game, which I wouldn't say about Mike McCarthy necessarily. Belichick will have this defense dialed in on throwing off the timing between Dak and his receivers, as they've started to evolve into more of a ball control offense where the quarterback doesn't hold onto the ball too long. And what has been so devastating for Dallas' opponents has been that when they've had to push the envelope, Cowboys defenders are lurking for those takeaways. We rarely see the Pats get greedy, and Mac Jones is fully content with taking what the defense has given to him, which is usually solid yardage to stay ahead of the sticks, like I said already. However, Calvin Moore finds ways to put defenders in conflict, and I think Tony Pollard could be one of those guys catching a linebacker and man at some point, make that guy miss and create a big play. So given the Cowboys winning a tough 27-23 battle, which actually puts them right on the number for the spread and the total, so really I don't want to have anything to do with this game, other than obviously watching it. And that brings us to Sunday Night Football, with a couple of 2-3 teams in the Seattle Seahawks and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers favored by 4.5 at home, total set at 42.5 points. I'm pretty sure this is not what NBC was expecting when they scheduled this game between two teams that won double-digit games last year. What a quarterback matchup. Geno Smith versus Ben Roethlisberger. The battle none of us knew we needed, as we probably have the 2 worst starters in the NFL right now, trying to get the teams to a 500 record and keeping the seasons alive. With Russell Wilson likely out at least 6 weeks, and the Seattle defense being on pace to allow the most yards per game in NFL history, I have a tough time envisioning them staying in control of their own destiny when Escada comes back, while Big Ben on the other side has looked like an old man, not capable of making plays off script or delivering big-time throws down the field, but finally had a solid showing, including a 50-yard touchdown to start the day and beating the Broncos after they had lost 3 straight, following one of the strangest results of the season still, considering the Bills have destroyed everybody in the way since that opening loss. For the Seahawks, they're still tied for second in yards per play on offense, but they've also run the fewest amount of plays, because it's been all so or nothing, and of course their defense is on pace for the most yards allowed per game in NFL history, which leads to the lowest time of possession for any team, as it has been all season long basically. The one thing that they have going for themselves is that they've only turned the ball over 3 times, which is the fewest in the NFL, but Geno Smith will have some big shoes to fill in Russ's absence. On the Steelers side, their offense had been as stagnant as it gets this season, until finally coming alive against a pretty darn good Broncos defense of all teams, as Najee Harris basically doubled his previous career high with over 120 rushing yards, and Big Ben threw his first 2 passes of 50 plus yards, even if they're still 27th in yards and points. The defense has only taken the ball away 4 times so far, but is still top 5 in pressure percentage, and have a defensive line capable of taking over games. Something I mentioned in a positive sense with the Broncos, who the Steelers actually just beat. Pittsburgh is at a league worst minus 9.1 yards of field possession on average, so following a turnaround showcase for Big Ben, going up against a lackluster Seahawks secondary should help keep that momentum going. They don't have Juju in the slot, as he's expected to be out for the year, which would have been a guy in favorable position for them, but Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson are too much to match up with for Seattle here, as we'll see a couple of big plays I believe to go with playing through their defense, which clearly has the advantage up front to force Geno into some bad decisions where he has to speed up his mental clock and Minkah Fitzpatrick jumps a route as Geno's eyes are locked in on one of those receivers. I don't expect this to be a pretty game to watch, but I certainly like the Steelers getting the job done here after what I saw from them last week, and knowing how much the Seahawks have depended on Russ creating magic to make up for some of those Stone Age level play calling on offense. So given the Steelers winning 24-18, and that already leads us to a final game here to discuss, Monday Night Football, the 4-1 Buffalo Bills going to Tennessee to take on the 3-2 Titans. Bills favored by 5.5, over under set at 54 points. And I don't know how many people remember this, but this was one of those weird Tuesday night games last year due to all the COVID-related postponements. And while it should have affected them more so because of it, the Titans actually pretty much dominated the Bills in that one. Buffalo, like I just mentioned, had one of the most confusing losses of the year on opening Sunday against the Steelers, but have since outscored their opponents 156-41 and overcome the kryptonite in the Chiefs at Arrowhead this past Sunday. On the flip side, Tennessee does not feel like a 3-2 team at all, and I would say the record is more so a result of the weak schedule, as the last 4 teams they faced have as many wins combined at this point, after getting blown up by the still undefeated Cardinals at home in the season opener. Looking at this Bills squad, right now they have scored the most points and allowed the fewest, while also having the best turnover differential at plus 11. That is very rare to see in the NFL at any point. I'm still far from sold on the Bills' run game, but I like how they used Josh Allen in that capacity this past Sunday, even stealing that counter-bash play that the Ravens love to run, and had success with it in the matchup against Kansas City. Plus, big ups to that offensive line, as Allen has only been sacked once per game, despite the stuff he does extending plays. You can say all you want about a weak schedule in terms of offenses they faced, but they're first in several key statistical categories on defense, and just held the most effective offense in the Chiefs to 20 points at their place. With the Titans, on the other hand, Ryan Tannehill has been sacked a league-high 20 times already, and only the Bears and Saints, 2 of the 3 most run-heavy offenses in the NFL, have cashed in on less than the 13 pass plays worth 20-plus yards, which has been the yang to the steady bang of Derrick Henry's yin. That's a mouthful. Who is once again carrying the load like a running back in the 70s would. The defense has not been as versatile as we've seen in the past, and they've been vulnerable through the air, as they're tied for 5th worst with 22 passes of at least 20 yards surrendered. This seems to have trap game written all over it, coming off that huge win over the nemesis in the Chiefs of Buffalo, but hearing all those guys speak post-game and understanding that they probably still remember what happened in Tennessee a year ago, I think they'll remain focused. This will be the best rushing attack the Bills have faced this season, and I don't see them just shutting down Derrick Henry, but they can at least contain him and force Tannehill to match Allen, who should have little issues dicing up this Titans secondary, which at that point, with a less creative passing scheme for Tennessee, and Buffalo having a defensive line that goes 9 guys deep, against a pass-protecting unit that has given up more sacks than any other team in the league, there's just a lot of factors that speak for the Bills here continuing to roll. It won't be as easy as it has been since starting this run, but I still think they win by a touchdown here. Buffalo gets the job done, 31-24. And that wraps up this Week 6 preview. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share with a couple of friends to get ready for Week 6. Make sure to still check out my power rankings from last week, and let me know how you think they should change after Week 5. As well as head over to my social media channels, which you can see on the screen right now, where I put up my final game picks on Sundays, post extra content, and just share my general opinions. I'll be back next week, probably with another preview video, but feel free to let me know in the comments what you would like to hear from me, or what you would like to break me down on film. Either way, I'll continue to pump out content and keep you guys covered. So until then, see you later. Peace!